thrilled to be with you here. My name is Harold Batiste, and a massive thank you to all the planners, the hotel suppliers, the CVBs, DMOs, DMCs, and really anyone tuning in today. Um, Many of you will recall our previous webcast, and we did several of them during the pandemic, and I really hope you found them beneficial. And truly, based on recent requests coupled with this current bustling state of our industry, what better time than now to put the band back together and bring you HPN Live? So, speaking of the state of our industry, and that's really our focus today in our discussion, and specifically how both planners and suppliers are just having to do business differently today. I'm honored to have some really special guests to help bring you some raw, honest, and really objective perspective on this important area. And by the way, we want you, our audience, to be a part of the discussion today. If you look on the right side of your screen there, you should see a chat box, and please chime in, say hi. We have our producer in the background who will gather questions, and we'll have a little time for Q&A at the end of today's discussion. So before bringing in our guests, let's welcome my cohort for today, who just happens to be our president and CEO here at HPN Global, Bill Kilburg. Hey, Bill, you there?
I'm here, man. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Bill. So
Bustling
Bill,
is a good word. Bustling is a good word.
Do you like?
Yeah.
An understatement indeed. So Bill, we're kind of celebrating a milestone event this week as HPN Global turns 21 years old. How do you feel about that?
Well, we're finally legal, which is nice, so we can get into a bar these days. Just joking. It's been a great ride, and this year I was looking at it, and we will touch, between closing contracts or beginning negotiations on a contract, probably 35,000 individual meetings contracts, and we're seeing a lot of stuff out there. You've heard me say this a couple of times. I'm older than most of you. I lived through the RTC crash, the .com bubble blow up, 9/11, the Great Recession, and then obviously COVID. And I've never seen a rebound like this, like unprecedented demand. And it's really created a pretty unique booking environment for planners out there that are trying to place a meeting somewhere. And that's why we have some hoteliers here with us on the call today. But the best word I can use is it's nuts. It's like the Wild West out there between, it is. Hotels are coming out with, and again, hopefully I'm not going to offend anybody on this call, but easily the most one-sided contracts I've seen in my career.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of hotel contracts, and it's some of the stuff that's coming out is and again, we'll get more into detail on this, but it's just mind-blowing what hotels are asking for in their contract, and then the speed with which a planner has to commit. The whole used to be 30-day hold, then it was 2 weeks hold, whatever it is. It's like a 24-hour hold. It's like sign now, or I'm going to give this space to somebody else. So, and I think John, who's going to join us, has a really good way of putting that. And I'll let him. I won't steal his thunder on that. So, why don't we let's get to the meat of it, Harold?
Yeah. No, you touched on some critically important areas here, and we'll hear more about it. So let's go ahead and bring on our guest. So our first guest, she's no stranger to HPN Live, and has previously joined me on a panel discussion, if you remember. Anyone who attended our partner conference in 2020, but please welcome the Vice President of Sales for Omni Hotels and Resorts, Cara Banasch. Hey, Cara, how are you today?
I'm awesome, Harold. It's good to see you. Bill Kilburg.
That was good.
Yeah, it's like a crazy deja vu. Here we are again.
The band's back together, and we got another cohort to the band. We'll bring in our second guest, and he's the Regional Vice President, Global Group Sales Americas at Hyatt Hotels, John Yeadon. Hey, John, how are you today?
Hey guys, thanks for letting me join the band. I've got backup vocals, drums, whatever you need. So just happy to be part of the group.
No, this is good, and I want to thank you both for taking the time out of your important days. And there's nothing going on in the hotel world these days, so I'm sure you got all the time to hang out with us. But in all seriousness, I do appreciate your time to talk about just where we are, and just in this world of kind of post pandemic, great rebound, et cetera. So, John, I'll kick it off with you if that's okay. Um, so, given where we are really today with this post pandemic rebound of travel, coupled with the real current state of the economic climate and inflation, right? We on our side, and our clients are telling us that, and we're seeing it, that hotel group rates are just have increased just exponentially, right? And it's on the rise, and we're seeing as much as, I don't know, 7-8% depending on the region. We've also heard from planners who, John, kind of feel like that they've kind of framed this perception that we're in this somewhat spiraling seller's market with no real end in sight. So, John, how much of this is a reality from through your lens, and do you see a leveling out in the near future, or is this just what normal looks like?
Yeah, thanks. Lot to that question. I think first I would start with this isn't just a fad. I think it's been here long enough.
Right.
It's been in too many markets for too long for it just to be a fad. I think this is the quintessential new normal. But I think what's really important, what we preach, and I think while we're on this call, is the need for balance here. As Bill, as you mentioned, your resilience and resourcefulness to survive all the things that you have, it's going to come back around. So I think, the relationships, balancing the partnership, being extremely transparent into the why, what is driving these costs. And I think how we can partner best together to work in these shorter time frames and not have surprises. I think that's the biggest key. We are seeing double-digit growth in ADR. We're seeing unprecedented short-term lead demands. I'm sure Omni in the industry is.
Right.
But I think it's really just underscored the need for better communication, picking up the phone. Hey, you might have these dates, but I got to be honest, they aren't going to be here for long. And that phrase we were talking about was back in the day, it was, hey, you made the short list. And us as hoteliers, we got very excited. We went back to our boss, said, hey, we're on the short list. Everyone's like, great, move the tentative funnel up. And now it's like, hey, great, you made our short list. So let's talk about
Right.
the other pieces of business that you're competing with. And I think salespeople, we need to be advocates for our clients. And I think as leadership, need to understand, okay, what's the balance of this relationship mean? Is it just this one program? We're going to need them in the future because while it's happening now, it's very short term. We still have some pretty big pace gaps in the future that we need to keep an eye on as hoteliers. And I think that underscores again the value of more than just capitalizing on today's market.
Yeah, I got some thoughts on that too. But Cara, give me your thoughts on this. I mean, just it's
Yeah.
interesting because it is. I've heard the word recently, normalize, and we were with another hotel brand recently, and that was a real buzzword of normalize. Is this the new normal, or is this thing going to level out and kind of what some people say come back to earth?
Well, I would say first that, let's take a step backwards a few years. Just those of us that have the advantage of several decades. John looks nice and useful. Youthful. He hasn't been battered by decades in the industry yet, like some of us. But let's think back to 2008 and 2009. I would share that hotel rates went backwards by a decade at that time. It took us really until 2018 and 2019 to recover what our 2007 and 2008 rates were. So in 2018-19, we were kind of getting to that peak. And then, of course, some stuff happened, right? And, we weren't buying. But the reality was that in those couple of years that we weren't buying, everything changed. So, we've all probably felt this or had this happen to us. You go to the grocery store and you buy the same 6 things that you've always bought, on a weekly basis, and your bill is always been $100, and now all of a sudden it's $140, and you have this sticker shock. The same is true for us from a hotel perspective. And so, our rates are definitely higher for sure. Some of that would have happened naturally if you'd been buying in 2020 or 21 or 22. So we have 3 years of business activity that wasn't really normal, but in that same time and space, those things that we buy on a regular basis, whether it's labor, whether it's food and beverage, whether it's linens, whether it's insurance, I mean, it goes through all levels of the business operationally and administratively. So, for sure, our reality is changed. I think the big question is, does it level off moving forward for all of us? And that's a much bigger question. That's really about inflation overall.
Right. Right.
The demand that John talked about, certainly, yes, we see that as well. And I think where customers need to keep some perspective is that it's not just group demand. We've got this trifecta.
Right. Transient demand too.
Everything coming back all at the same time, right? So
Right.
you've got group demand very high. Everybody's got pent up meetings that they need to get back on the books, and they're in a hurry to do that. But we've got leisure travel, which is at all-time highs. People want to get back and see their families. They want to go on vacation. They want to get back to places that they love or go to new places. And then, while BT isn't back to any kind of stabilized volume, it is beginning to heat up. And so I want people to know there's no corporate directive to be opportunistic. It's just really a question of supply and demand.
Well, so Bill, well, go ahead, John. I'm sorry.
No, that was me, I think.
Oh, Bill. Yeah.
I was going to say we were just meeting with one of your major competitors, Cara, and their mantra for 2023 is price for profit. Okay, like if you're giving up a couple of points of occupancy, but you're moving rate up 16, 17%, especially at the upper tiers, the more luxury tiers.
Yeah.
In numbers I looked at this morning, in the U.S., hotels are projected to generate $200 billion in rooms revenue. Versus 2019, the hotels did 170 million. But 2023, they're going to go on 4% less occupancy overall in the country. So if you extrapolate that math, the rate growth across the entire country is 22-23% projected for this year, revenue per available room. So one of my fundamental questions is, I've been on the hotel financial side as well, so I know how that's the flow through looks on that, right? Mm-hmm. But how do you reconcile that with a customer who's looking at a rate that's gone up 10, 15%, but at the same point in time, do I have housekeeping or I don't have housekeeping? I don't know.
Right.
Some basic services like that. I mean, do planners need to write housekeeping into their contract at this point?
I can address that. I mean, I think those are really good questions. And I think that those are questions that we welcome in the sales process. Mm-hmm. So, I'll speak from an Omni perspective. The narrative around lack of services is one that we kind of put to bed, 2 years ago. We said, listen, we're in the hospitality business,
right?
Not just the lodging business, right? So it's we need to provide more than just a bed. It's about service. It's about, it's about all components of that experience. I won't tell you that there aren't places where, there are, some variances from a service perspective, but we really are back in a situation that, housekeeping, we have room service in most of our hotels. Now, some of those things look and feel a little bit different. Your room service order might look a little bit more like Uber Eats than the old white glove room service tray with the linens and the silverware and whatnot. Your housekeeping service, we're sensitive to the fact that there's still a guest who doesn't want people in their rooms and has, some sort of sensitivity to that. But it's there and it's available, and you don't have to, like some other brands that we're hearing, you don't have to order it. You don't have to ask for it 24 hours in advance. But, Bill, to your question, I would ask those questions in advance. If it's important to you that you have 100% availability of certain outlets, that, a particular space that you like from a networking perspective, you want to make sure that it's open during certain hours because you know that your group likes to have a drink and socialize or whatever the case may be. We're happy to have those conversations in advance because we certainly don't want to miss someone's expectation because of something simple like, hey, a lot of our people like to get up at 6:30 in the morning and have breakfast. Is your restaurant going to be open? Or little things like that.
Well, it's to John's point of transparency, I think, in the process, in the contracting process.
Yeah, I think just a few thoughts on that, and one for Cara real quick. I'm 20 years in, so shout out to the wife's skin routine. We're good.
Let's have those notes in the comments.
Right. So, a few thoughts on this, and I think I learned a lot about this last summer as GM in Minneapolis. it is about conversation. I think some of the points you made, Bill, especially on occupancy, that's by design in some regards, right? If we don't have the ability maybe to keep up at the same levels we used to, maybe we are going to price a little bit higher and have a little bit of less occupancy. I think from a staffing perspective, it really does depend on market. But that conversation, as you're pre-planning to better understand the ebbs and flows of your group and the needs, we did this exercise a few times with a couple of groups, and it was, of the people in this room, how many people actually want daily housekeeping service every day? And really, it was less than 50-50 that wanted someone in their room. Of course,
Right.
if you're at a resort or you're with kids and there's stand and stuff like that, by all means, it's the VIPs and there's certain people that, hey, we want to do that. It's not that we're trying to take away all the time. I think we're just using labor more efficiently and more effectively. And on that same point, we learned a lot when we had to work with nothing. And I
Right.
think the operational efficiency and operational agility, as we call it, that we learned on property for cross training our associates, that helps everyone. So we mentioned this prior, was when you check in, you have all these people at the front desk, right? And there's this huge wave, and most of the food and beverage people are waiting for people to get in house for them to service. And then after you check in, there might be this lull at the front desk. Of course, there's guest requests and some other things, questions. But what we learned to do, I think, and really came out effective for both colleagues and for guests, is to be more agile. So that person at the front desk gets cross-trained in a food and beverage outlet. Now we're moving with the business. We're moving with the experience. So for the customer, we're able to impact a little bit differently. We may not have as much headcount, but we're more effective and we're in the places you need us to be. And then for the colleague, the ability to cross-train and really be a true director's ops. So when they move up their career, they have the ability to do both the things we're asking now as on-property GMs and operators. So it definitely was, a reduction, but I think we've learned from it, and we got to keep putting people where it impacts the guest experience at the end of the day.
So John, let's go back to those are all great points, and to the question that kind of Bill brought up about writing things in contracts and so on and so forth. But let's peel the curtain back a little bit, John, and I'll stay with you, and then Kara, I'd love your thoughts as well. I kind of opened the question with this perception of it being a seller's market. Tell us at the hotel level about the empowerment of your sales managers, your directors of sales. Because listen, if I'm a planner, right, I'm going to expect the hotel to be able to make business decisions based on, maybe is it a relationship, is it a partnership? I booked 2 or 3 or 4 meetings with you in the past, so there should be some preferential pricing. And, but what we're seeing now is, and I'm not pointing to Hyatt or Omni specifically,
Sure.
but just across the industry, we're seeing even sales managers say, hey, look, I'd love to give you X rate, but my revenue manager said I can't, right? Or in our business evaluation, it came up and said that I've got to stay at this rate or I can't give this concession. So it gives the appearance that it's truly a revenue management run hotel at the property level these days.
Yeah. So I'd like to go on record here to correct that assumption. I think at least for Hyatt, and any revenue managers or directors that are on the call, love you. Revenue is an analytical arm to assist the sales process. They are not the final decision maker. So anyone hiding behind that veil, by all means, please escalate that up. The directors of sales, the salespeople, I'm not saying they're not important in terms of revenue, but they aren't the final answer. So whoever's hiding behind that veil of masquerading between this is yes or no, it's really not the process that we teach, nor that we should be using as an excuse. There's absolutely a higher emphasis on revenue managing rates and even prices, food and beverage outlets, things like that. We have learned from that. But at the end of the day, it is about partnership. It is about how do we maximize the opportunity now, but look at this customer as more than just one booking, because as we all know, it's way more costly to try and find a new customer than to keep an existing one. And again, that might be that you need to move off of a pattern a little bit, or you might need to shorten your setup time, or we give you a portion of the ballroom for your AV rigging or your rear screen projection, whereas you're used to having the whole thing. We get that, but that's where the conversation needs to happen. And that's where our salespeople, and we preach this, and I'm sure it's the same for Omni, is, hey, we're together in this. It's us versus the problem, not us versus each other. And I think if we got to team up to make sure that this business looks as good as it can, then that takes both of us. So my recommendation and advice is if we're a meeting planner and we're holding on to 50K or 100K in food and beverage that we know we're going to spend, and we led with a food and beverage minimum that's less, I would come with the real spend right away, right? Because it is going through a business evaluator. So the more profitable your business looks initially, the better, right? And I get that we hold some stuff back for negotiation, but I think it sometimes doesn't get you across the finish line in this market. And it might do yourself a disservice not to really talk about all the flexibility that we have. And us on the other side, we need to listen and say, okay, we can do that, or ask the questions that might make that business process a little bit more favorable to get the yes that we all need.
Right. Cara, thoughts?
Yeah, listen, I don't disagree with anything that John has said. I would just add to it, there is how we would like for things to work optimally, and then our current reality. So, one of the first questions you had, Harold, was just about this sort of feeling that it's more of a buyer's market than it is, or more of a seller's market than it is a buyer's market.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think, any of us that have been, doing this any length of time have dealt with business interruptions or weather, disturbances, things that kind of derail us. And you learn in a big hurry that, today's advantage is somebody else's tomorrow. So, you aren't going to survive long if you approach things from that mentality. But one of the things that we all are dealing with right now that I would just, call it out, it's the elephant in the room. Would I love that people could, negotiate, efficiently and have all the right answers? Yes. But we've got 50% of our hotel property teams that are brand new. So, we're doing our best to get them all through sales training. We're doing kickoffs. We're doing in-person events. We've got all kinds of different types of video things that we're trying to get people ramped up as fast as we can. But I'll tell you very honestly, there's no question in my mind that I've got some people that are having conversations with customers that are still very much in learning mode. And so, a best practice I would suggest, because, we all are feeling the friction of, the booking process and certainly the contracting process, is to, engage, a dialogue. And, if we can do it in person, that's always amazing. But, the one good thing that has come out of, the last couple of years is our capability to have forums like this one today, or Zoom calls, team calls, whatever it is. Like, let's get the seller, let's get the customer, let's get our HPN partner, let's get our DOSMs all on a call. And, John referenced this. Let's talk about priorities, because if we start going through the contract and we, and we, shave a little off of the rate, and then, and then we go and then we talk about AV, and then maybe we come back to food and beverage, everywhere that we modify limits our choices down the road. So, if we can get on the table, hey, what's your budget and what are the things that are the most important to you? And then, let's hammer this thing. Let's take a look at this agreement and let's work through the clauses. Where sometimes right now what I see happening is that a seller doesn't have all the answers. So they get a couple of questions that they can't field. They go back to their leader. It's like a bad ping pong game, right? Back and forth, back and forth. And every time something changes in that contract, we have less and less capability to change things that might be more important. And if we were actually talking about it, we would be making some different decisions, all of us together. And I think that's where the frustration and what I call friction in the sales process and contracting process is probably, the greatest at this point, is just a good amount of inexperience, add to the mix a little bit of uncertainty from a customer standpoint, and then, a lack of dialogue, which, most of us know, if we can get off email, if we can get off of text in some cases nowadays, get the right people to participate in conversations, we can get things done.
Well, and Cara used one of my favorite words, friction, in the booking process. Like we want to reduce as much friction as possible, get to a deal that everybody can live with, and get that deal closed, because that's good for you, good for the clients, good for us, obviously. But we're seeing some things come through in contracts. Like, I want to bring up this new event fee concept, which I don't know if you're doing or not. I know there's management companies that have made this a standard. So in addition to your service fee and your taxes on banquet food and beverage, there's like a 9 or 10% event fee added on. So you're fully loading banquet food and beverage by sometimes 42, 43% with just fees on top, you know? And we have to go negotiate that out. And then, but then it's like you said, it's ping pong back and forth. Well, you know, it's company policy, whatever they say. And then we have to, you know, we all have to argue over it for a week, and everybody hopes that the space is still there for the client, right? I don't know. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Harold. Go ahead.
No, that's a good point. I mean, and that's a kind of across the board thing, and it's not like, you know, you directly, but
Friction.
It's the
Yeah,
friction,
friction's
and so Bill, I'll disclose you a little secret here, and in being that, you know, prior to this call, you know, Bill sent out an email across our organization and asked specifically, hey, you know, we're going to be on HPN Live, we're going to have Hyatt, we're going to have Omni on. You know, send me or send him some of the craziest things that you're seeing right now in terms of contract language terms,
right,
and things. So we don't have time to get into all of that, but
no,
that's fair.
Love it.
That's fair. I'll take a first stab. I don't know. I'm hoping I haven't seen that event fee yet, but it doesn't mean it's not out there. You know, I think this somewhat is
groups have it. Yeah.
Okay, and it could be. This is definitely a product, I think, of you know, our ownership groups have gotten used to those returns, and
Right.
you know, having been there and been there in the properties when, you know, this was going on, and the stuff we had to do to deliver those returns obviously wasn't sustainable. But it's hard when they see a profitability number or a flow through number, and so we are trying to get creative. There's no doubt about it, about ways to increase revenue where we can, because the reality is some of these costs are pass through costs. You know, Cara mentioned this before, inflation, but you think of something like as crazy as the price of wheat going up and the ripple effect that has throughout the industry, right? Because you need grain to feed livestock, and that's going to get all your poultry and your meat and all these things. But then it doesn't stop there. We had labor challenges, right? But once we started to staff up, we couldn't get the products that we needed. So we had to triage what it was that we would get delivered, because our delivery drivers didn't have drivers to bring it to us. And so you're doing so much more with less, that you're trying to meet a number with less resources, and out comes some pretty creative people that come up with some of these fees. So I'm not saying that it's not felt. No one wants to be nickel and dimed. I think being very aware and disclosing right away what these fees are on our side, and also where they're going and where we have flexibility, because some we might have the ability to be flex, but I'm going to hit you back to say, okay, hey, can you give me that food and beverage, whatever, a little bit higher? Can you give me a little bit of rental or setup fee? Can I get rate $2 or $3 here? Maybe just on the suites, or does the staff rooms have to be 50%? It is a give and take, but we can always find it through dialogue. And I agree. No one wants to see a fee that just comes on. But I think, again, that's the transparency and conversation that might start with friction, but we can always find that middle ground if we do lay everything on the table and talk about budget in a really transparent manner.
Yeah, I would agree with John. I haven't seen an event fee. That's not something that we've really talked about at Omni. Although, you know, everybody wants, you know, we've got a different kind of an attendee that's coming to things, right? So people want different types of seating. They want campfires. Everybody wants, you know, a blueberry farm at their event, or they want puppy petting, or, you know, and some of those things are, you know, DMC costs, but there are certain things that, you know, that we've been asked more regularly to have from a hotel perspective. And so, you know, certainly we've talked about fees as it relates to sort of decor or specialized setups. More often than not, if there's been a dialogue that I've been engaged in regularly, it's about banquet sets and banquet turns. So, you know, as we are contracting, we assume, you know, a reasonable number of set changes and whatnot. But, you know, sometimes people are starting to get very creative in their programming, and they want to use meeting space for, you know, 3 and 4 different things. And so if we've got banquet teams that are engaged in complicated turns or things that are out of the norm, we might charge for something like that. But, you know, I agree with John. You know, we're in a different situation because we're largely wholly owned.
You're
but
lucky
I
for
think
ownership
that,
respect.
you know,
Yeah.
when when you sit at the budget table, and if you ever have the privilege of dealing with, a president who was a former director of finance, and some of the asset managers and things that exist out there on some of our managed hotels, depending on how they're financed, it's everybody's feeling the pinch right now. So I can't tell you honestly that I think that I see that we aren't going to continue to see some things that are going to look a little bit different in our charges in our pricing scenario.
Yeah.
Well,
So, go ahead, Bill.
I was going to say, I think from a hotel ownership perspective, because I've sat on that side as well, I think owners looked at 2022 and rates increased significantly. They were still smarting from 20 and 21. But at the same point in time, you all who are running hotels were doing it on skeleton crews, which, like John's point, is not sustainable. But an owner's looking at that going, oh, yeah, well, look, why can't we just do that from now on? Like, let's just do that, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And one other
We
point.
love it that we cross-trained our employees, but I'm going to tell you this: you certainly don't want my sales teams, prepping your veg in
Agree that.
banquets,
Right.
and you really don't want me flipping omelets on a banquet station.
Yeah, me back in the valet, I'm like, this car is nice. Just one point on Bill, you're and when you deal with multiple ownership groups, they play mom and dad real well. Oh, well, your competitor across the street's doing this. Why don't you implement that? So they start taking from every brand
Right.
what is good. And again, I'm not blaming them. They're smart. They're protecting their asset. But again, it does come back to us making sure there's value attached or an explanation in another area to try and offset, because they're never going to stop getting creative. You said it once, Cara, when we mentioned before. Let's be honest, we're here to make money too, but different ways of doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get the mom and dad piece, but I don't know. Are we going to now see an event fee from Hyatt and Omni moving forward? Because Bill just said it. I don't know.
Yeah, thanks,
listen,
Bill.
pass out of the bag. I'm
already
on
wrote
my
that down.
hotline to the contracts department when we get off the call.
Yeah, right.
Can you send me that clause, Bill? I just want to take a look
Yeah.
at it. Yeah.
So,
what I really feel sorry for is a planner out there who's trying to navigate this world, and it really is the Wild West right now from a contractual perspective. A planner who's trying to navigate that world by themselves. And I don't care if it's us or one of our competitors that we're friendly with, but having somebody by your side who sees a lot of these contracts, understands the terms, has the purchasing power to kind of say, hey, pump the brakes a little bit on this stuff.
right.
I feel sorry for that person who's out there on their own right now trying to navigate this environment.
Yeah. And I agree, it's, you don't want to go about this alone, I think, in this climate. And that's my 2 cents. And whether it's it's an HP and Global or somebody else, I think you've got to have somebody that specializes in this area and does it day in and day out. Hey, so Cara, you mentioned something earlier about, the pinch, and, maybe there will be a scenario where agreements and contracts do look a little bit different because there is a pinch, and whether it's, whether it's, the brand or the ownership are feeling those budgetary pinches. Talk to us about conversations that you're having with planners who are truly budget strapped. Hey, I had X budget last year or 3 years ago to do this program. My stakeholders will only allow my budget to increase by, X, right? But I've tasked with pulling off the same program. And this gets into some of the dialogue. And you mentioned something earlier about, again, sales managers, let's get off of email and let's get off of text and let's get this face-to-face dialogue to be able to have these candid conversations. But, I've got X dollars here, right? And I've got to pull off this program. One thing that we're doing is we're getting more into, instead of the what, it's more of the how it makes you feel. What's the experience piece and the experience takeaway that the attendee is supposed to have, where you can make your dollars go further, right? By doing some experience things versus having, the massive set that cost hard dollars, right? The blowout, last night event that brings in all of this, ancillary costs that, again, are hard costs. But what are the conversations that you're telling these planners? Because we have planners on here as an audience, right? And so they may have that question. I haven't seen it in the chat box, but they may ask that question of, we're bringing you a lump of cash and we need you to help us pull this off.
Spend it wisely.
Yeah. Well, listen, I mean, I think a couple things. We're all super creative. So, if we have an idea where we're headed with something, and if somebody will be, so transparent as to share with us, we are all about the long term. So, we talked about some of these things already. I mean, is it, can we do a little bit better on the staff rate than 50%? Can we do a little bit better than, 1 per 40, which sometimes we've gotten down to, and have 1 per 50? Can we get a little bit of space back? Could we use some of our pre-function, or could we use alternate spaces for functions that allow us to actually have some other revenue in the building? On the food and beverage side of things, we get creative, and listen, the same inexperience that we have with our teams, we're finding there are some new entrants to the meeting planning market as well. And so things that might seem like automatics to us if we've been around a long time is, hey, do you have sponsors? Is there somebody that you can help to offset a breakfast? Is there somebody that, wants an opportunity to get some exposure, other than via digital, ways? We can build out a break that's branded. We can do cool things with our food and beverage presentations that, that represent a brand. I think, Harold, you talked a little bit about experience. We're always careful when we're negotiating that we don't trim out so much from a financial perspective that then things don't feel good, right? So,
Right.
I mean, I think you want to be cautious around, maybe instead of, hand delivered amenities, maybe it's that we put, an amenity store together, or, like before you head up to your room at night, it's, a sweet and salty break set up in the elevator foyers. We come up with these kinds of things all the time to try and make sure that we haven't eliminated all the good things that feel great at meetings. We used to do crazy over the top. You talked about at receptions with full bars and all that kind of stuff. Can you cut an hour off your reception? An hour off of a full bar reception will really help you out. And depending on the crowd, I mean, like that could be a significant, change. But
Right.
little things that feel good, like a fruit infused water in the lobby doesn't cost us much. It helps to create that sense of arrival, and it's a good sort of sense of hospitality. I think that every property and every brand has their own examples of those things, but we talk about those things a lot. The banquet menus is one that I've been asked about on a number of different panels. So I'll just put it out there. If you sit down with us and tell us, hey, we've got, X amount of dollars per head, we want to know that. And, we certainly don't want people leaving our buildings, not feeling that they had enough, or that they got, a good food and beverage experience, because that actually reflects back on us more often than it does on the group. But, our chefs are very creative. They can come up with, less
Right.
expensive break options, or they can trim things out of budgets. I also think, one of the things that's sort of changed is this, even from sort of a popular culture standpoint, we are all better acquainted with kind of that fast fresh. So, maybe there's not a lunch on one day, but we've got, a huge sort of, Chipotle-esque station set up in one of our outlets, and we know that we're going to get 100 meetings guests that are going to come through there. We transfer costs to the individual attendee versus the planner. That's something that we're looking at doing. And how do we do that efficiently? And how do we do it without, sort of altering the operation, of, some of our standard restaurants and things? I think the sky's the limit, but communication is really the key, and that we all just keep our eye on the lens of how that attendee feels at the meeting, because the more that we trim, the more risk there is in that, that somebody go home and not feel like they ever want to go back to an event again. That's what we really don't want.
Yeah. No. So I want to switch the conversation. Before I do that, just anyone that's dialed in our audience, just a quick check with you all, make sure everything is groovy. The chat box, feel free to chime in with your questions. And listen, John and Cara They don't have to all be softballs. You know, they're big kids. So, and speaking of that, I want to move to let's talk about contracting. And Bill talked about it a little earlier about space holds. Man, I mean, John, is first option space hold a thing of the past?
Yeah, I kind of did away with first option a while back, and we called it currently available. Please let me know if you want to secure this space, because it's just too hard to put yourself against somebody else if it comes in. Now, I think we did that on purpose, and this was in San Diego because we had demand, but it really put the onus back on you as the planner to say, whoa, 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 no, I'm interested. Cool. We need to talk about this, this, and this. What's your decision time frame?
Yeah.
Are you coming out to site? And again, that might sound a little bit coarse, but it lets us know that you're interested. If we put everything on first option hold, then everybody's going to second option who wasn't first, right? And no one wants that. So I think the currently available, please let me know if you're interested in securing, starts the dialogue that's needed in order to actually put something on a hold. And I think what that does for both of us is it gets all these potential friction issues on the plate early, instead of on the 23rd hour when we're trying to get this signed before an end of quarter or before someone goes on vacation or, money runs out. So I think for us, it's hey, what do we need as salespeople to give you a first optional hold and let you know that up front and very readily able to discuss that.
Yeah, John, but this goes back to the training, right? And you've got new people that are in these positions of sales managers, and they're the face of your hotels. And, in a perfect world, sure, we're going to have everything ready for you, buttoned up with a bow on it and everything that you want to see to put on a first option hold. But, sometimes that's not the reality, right?
Sure.
It takes time to, and I'm talking outside of just the casting a wide net and the bidding perspective. This is obviously, hey, you know what? We've already cast the net. We've got your bids. We've got your availability. Now this is the second touch point of let's drill down and let's get some space on hold. And so, especially whether you're dealing with an intermediary like us or even direct with a, with a meeting planner, everyone's got somebody to go report that back to, right? And there could be, and what we're seeing is that time to get those answers is not always the same.
Yeah, just two more things on that. I think, in the digital world of RFPs through platforms where we less talking and more reporting is, hey, are your dates really flexible or not? Because if you are flexible and you're not putting that in there, you're probably going to get a turn down on something that could have been a different option. I'm looking at Northeast. Okay, particularly you're looking at New York, you're looking at Jersey, or you're looking at those details matter very tremendously, because if you say I'm looking at West Coast and I got one that says I'm looking at San Diego, which one's going to rise to the top if I'm in San Diego, right? So I think the details do matter. Additionally, we do have a lot of youth and a lot of inexperienced salespeople, just like Omni. We lost a lot of good people. We're training them up, and maybe their first response isn't necessarily to pick up that phone. Maybe if we, put an RFP through TikTok, we might get a little bit more engagement. Who knows? But we have to do a better job and just say, hey, pick up the phone. Like, if they don't have the information, available limitations, would love to discuss with you. I've got my meeting at 3:00. Would love to have these answers so that I can go fight for you, right? And I think that's on both sides. But we need all the information if we can get it up front. And at the same time, we got to pick up the phone or even answer the phone if you are calling, to have that context of what might not be visible on the words on the paper.
Yeah. Cara, thoughts?
Yeah, again, no disagreement. I think we're all dealing with the same sort of variables. And, demand right now is one thing, but, some of the challenges around this started before the pandemic. It's not an HPN issue, but, some of the electronic sourcing tools that are out there, and I won't call anybody out, but if you're a sales manager sitting at your desk and you're getting 12 leads a day, you're going to actually, really push the ones that you feel have the highest probability of conversion. And, that doesn't, it certainly ties back to things that you think are going to fit your revenue model. But a lot of times it comes down to engagement, right? I'm gonna just story sell here for a short minute, and I won't belabor this, but I was in one of our sales teams not that long ago, talking to a young professional that had less than 90 days of experience, and I asked what her greatest challenges were, and she said, "Well, I can't get people to return my messages." So we had some fun, and I said, "Do these people actually know you?" I said, "Because if they don't, I'll leave some messages for you, and let's see if I can get them to call me back." And so we went through that, and I'm glad to she called me and said, "Hey, people are calling me back now." Those were some good tips, but listen, I think it's about engagement, right? So you want to know that you're in the ballpark from a business parameters perspective, but somebody that will actually engage with you is far more likely to move forward. And we'd had a lot of challenges, in 2018 and 2019 with prospects and tentatives that were sitting on the books for 30, 60, 90 days. And we, and oftentimes like the answer was can't get a response, planner won't call me back. I mean, if I looked at my turn down reports in 2018 and 2019, like no response or, meeting never materialized. Those were, two of the top two reasons. People just, they sourced and then they went MIA. So, I think, demand, and we can all do a better job of staying connected and engaging with one another if we really want something. But the other thing is just,
Right.
maybe Harold, I think this is an industry conversation. We get it. Everybody's got a boss. Everybody's got to be able to take something back for sort of an approval process. But I think we need to be further along in knowing what our priorities are when we source so that we can convert a little faster. I think, the days of, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days to fruition, if somebody came to me as a sales leader and said, "Hey, my customer really wants this, but they've got to talk to their boss and they're on the road until next Tuesday," I'm going to say, do the right thing, right? And especially if we've got a partner involved and there's relationships and things. But, if it's just, "Hey, we need to hold this indefinitely and we're still, being considered along with 10 other places," I'm going to be like, "Hey, hedge a bet and, take care of yourself."
One other just quick point on that, I think for both of us is, and I'm sure it's equally frustrating, when you're lost or you're turned down and you don't know why, that really leaves like, oh, what? And it's happening more on the client side too. It's like, why'd you turn me down? Like, what was it?
Yeah.
I think knowing why on both sides only allows us to either include that information the next time, pitch differently. So I think on both sides, if we can say, hey, you lost because of this, or it wasn't your fault, or hey, you could have done this better on both sides. I think that sharing of communication on the business that doesn't happen is just as important as the stuff that does.
Well, I think it underscores, excuse me, our company motto is relationships matter, and it's been that our company motto for the last 15 years, like relationships matter. And I think COVID taught us that, because having a relationship with somebody, we were able to reach out and get things done that wouldn't have gotten done otherwise. And I think it's the same in this marketplace. So I can call Cara can call me and say, "Hey, here's this piece of business. We want it, we don't want it, whatever it is." And then we can figure something out because we're friends and we've talked about 150 deals together, right?
Yep.
It's just somebody coming off the street and they're getting turned down. They don't know why, or you're getting turned down and you don't know why. That's where relationships are at the forefront of everything we do. So
Yep. Spot on.
I want to move to similar but different kind of topic. You have to imagine, Cara and John, that one of our major metrics we track is other than what we source, what we contract. The big metric is what picks up, right? And we're setting on our end. We've got record-setting RFP volume, and but we've also have seen an increase in maybe groups that over contracted, and so it leaves them in an attrition scenario, and which of course we're going to work to attempt to mitigate. But just in generally speaking, and Cara, I'll kind of kick to you here. What are you seeing in this area of just pickup across the board at Omni these days, and from a planner perspective? And then when you get into that talk of attrition and mitigation, just from an Omni, I guess, perspective, what's your strategy around that?
So I'll share a statistic with you that, I think is encouraging, but, so our standard contract before anybody negotiates something different is for, 15% slippage. So, anything that's negotiated, like 20 is kind of standard. That's what we see most frequently. And if it's something Smurfy or, different, maybe a little bit more than that. But, groups are picking up. I mean, groups are picking up
Right.
at their blocks, above their blocks. So when we're looking at our productivity, we're actually seeing a lot of positive slippage where, we netted for the sellers to 15% or 20% and things are picking up at 100. So, we're having to look at, what's real production and then what's just sort of positive slippage on past bookings.
Right.
But, Harold, that's point made to actually assist with what's coming next. If you have somebody right now that's in trouble and thinks that they're going to be in trouble, like to be honest about it and to put their hand up and to let us
Let 'em
know.
know,
And the
right.
further in advance we can know,
Yep.
the better. Because with this other phenomenon of groups that are overperforming and looking for additional rooms, we have more capability right now with short-term demand to help fill those gaps. And it used to be that if you had a big program, and I'm going to use Champions Gate as an example for Orlando, if you weren't going to pick up, that was one of those markets where there was always enough demand that, we could probably pick something up inside of, 14 days, 30 days, 60 days and fill the gap. But right now around the country, we've got enough lead volume that if somebody said to one of our teams, oh my gosh, we contracted, 600 rooms and we think that we're only going to be able to fill up 450, I can probably fill those 150 right now. And
Right.
so, the conversation is important. A lot of our contracts, and especially, some savvy groups or groups that had a lot of history, they have block space review dates in their agreements. And,
Right.
I encourage people all the time, do not let those block space review dates pass without checking in, because if you're behind pace on your registration, or if for some reason you've got different departments in your organization that are, peeling back their expenditures, there's a lot of opportunities in terms of the way that we design those contracts that if
Right.
we
Right.
know, we can help mitigate those losses.
So I had a
Yep.
situation about a month ago, Kara. On that point, I want to underscore for all the planners out there: do not blow your attrition date. Okay, like know when it's coming up, know where you're at, advise the hotel. I got involved in a situation. I'm not going to name the hotel and throw them under the bus, where the client blew that attrition date by less than a week. The hotel turned around, the director of sales and marketing, and sent a bill for $168,000 of what I call anticipatory attrition. Like the hotel went and did the math and said, okay, pay this, pay it by next, on a Friday, they sent a bill, they said, pay it by Monday, or we're going to consider you in breach of your contract. And we're going to tear up the contract. And then we got involved and we helped solve the problem.
Right.
But like when the director of sales and marketing says to the client, we feel like we're on strong legal ground, you're not in the hospitality business anymore. You're in the profit
Yeah.
business, right?
Right.
And that
Yeah,
should be
that's
something
not right.
we all sit down and work out together, as
Yep.
opposed to somebody taking a hard line on a very hypersensitive reading of a contract. You know what
Yeah, I
I'm,
think
you know what
just
I'm saying?
yeah, to add a little bit on the same, we're experiencing very, very strong pickup. You got call it bleisure or I heard digital nomadism and the laptop luggers. People are doing pre and post like crazy, so that can help.
Yeah.
The typical patterns aren't the same. I think the earlier you can get to us, the more opportunity we're going to have to mitigate. And I think using partners like you guys, right? If it's somebody that we know, you might have another piece of business
We
that
can
doesn't
also
even
help fill it
impact
up.
them, and you can help
Right.
push us that way. And we look the other way on this one, and that is the power of relationships and partnership that I would recommend you use, because it doesn't all have to be the same dates. Of course, we want that. Of course, in the same year, it's going to be more helpful. I would also say, please don't come to a hotel and say, waive this 168K and just be like upset if we're not like, okay, can we talk about another program, or hey, that's a lot, can we do a portion? We're going to come to the table, but I think it does have to come with an open mind of, hey, there is some loss here and we were reasonably expecting this amount. We're going to try and do what we can to resell, but at the same time, it has to be a mutual two-way street.
Right. And that's exactly what we did. We sat down with the client who the original position was,
Right.
I'm never going back to that hotel. And we said, well, you probably are going back to that hotel because that's how we're going to solve the problem.
Right. We gotta clear a balance here.
We're going to give them another meeting or two, hold your nose, have another meeting or two there. Everything's going to be
Right.
good. Get that problem
Yeah.
solved.
Yeah.
So,
But better approach. It needs to be an approach that's open-minded from us too. So
right. Yeah.
Um,
I couldn't agree more.
so
Harold, we
go
talked
ahead,
a
Kara.
lot about demand and not being able to find space. But I know that Hyatt hotels are always 100% full. I'm going to put it out there. Here's the truth. There's always a half a dozen hotels that are on our radar screen here in Dallas at headquarters that need business, and I still have a few of those. I also have some hotels that we opened during the pandemic that didn't have a bunch of base all stacked up. So, before we lose the opportunity to say so, anybody that's having some trouble finding some space, we can make some recommendations for you.
Yeah, right. Call Cara at Omni Hotels.
Yeah.
Hey, guys.
And you hit it on the head there. I was going there. It's to we've got a wide audience.
You're next.
We've got
And
a wide
John,
audience.
John, you need a
guys.
commercial too. Give him
Yeah,
a
no, I was
Hyatt.
going to say, I have
What's
no
going on
problem
in
sharing.
Hyatt?
I have no problem sharing a multi-year with Omni. We can do that. That's totally fine.
Yes.
Listen, no, for us, same. We have a lot of really good growth. We have a lot of priority hotels that still need some stuff, but really for us, it is the growth. We've been 6 consecutive years of industry-leading net room growth. So when I started, I think we had 250 hotels. We're up to 1,300 now. We've been doing a lot in the resort space, a lot in the lifestyle space. It's fun to be a part of that and kind of see the brand grow, but also we're still a group company. And, we try to play a lot in the cities where you need to be, but where we're not, we understand that and we're not trying to be what we aren't either. So just happy to see the industry back and to share conversation with experts like you all. And it's nice to be on this side rather than trying to figure out how we're going to staff and not have demand, It's a
Right,
good problem
exactly.
for both
Good
parties.
problems
Yep.
to have. I file these under positive problems.
Yep.
Yeah. So I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, it's just good to be on this side, and John and Cara. First of all, I'm proud to consider you both friends, and we've had to have what I call spirited conversations in the past, but it's just it's all with the same goal in mind to just walk away with amicable solutions to things, and so now we're in this space of, man, how can we just work together to book good business? Cara, anything else going on in just Omni, just general that our audience needs to know about?
Well,
I
listen,
got 30 seconds here.
Yeah, in 31 days, I'm opening a 500-room resort up in Frisco, Texas, and 37 days from now, I'm opening another 400 resort there in Tempe. So that's the immediate thing on our horizon, and anything that you can do to help PGA Frisco or Tempe, those would be two on our need list right now.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, our sincerest thanks to all of you at HPN, and I think it's a good time for you all to, you've got a great value proposition, and I think people need you. So thanks for being at the table always with us.
Absolutely. John, you want to close us out? Anything that just hot going on just in Hyatt outside of what you mentioned?
Just a lot into the wellness space right now for us. Really, really focusing on how do we make sure that value is there for the attendee beyond the churn and the burn of all the airports and flying. And for the planner in particular, we're focused on you. There's a lot of resources that we can do with Together by Hyatt to help, ease your job, take a little bit of the work away, and then have our experts help you plan along the way. But big thank you again to HPN and Cara. Really, really appreciate you guys are great partners. That's what we're here. We're all here for the customer, and I think we do it really, really well when we do it together.
Well, I certainly appreciate you both as having you both as strategic partners here at HPN, and thank you for spending some time with us today. So for the audience, hey, thank you for joining us today. Keep an eye out for our next HPN Live. The band's back together, and we'll have a webcast coming to a stream near you. So thank you all, and have a great rest of your day.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cara. Thanks, John.
Still here. We're enjoying gorgeous Tampa Bay. We can't wait to welcome you to HPN 23, where we're going to be at the Marriott Water Street Complex.
We're here on our planning tour, and we're going to have an awesome event for 23 in Tampa. So if you missed out on Denver, you better get your registration in this year.
And as always,
Relationships matter.